Good morning, everyone, and welcome to another edition of BIIC Sponsor Spotlight. Today, we have one of the amazing founders of BIIC, Tony Stedman from Accenture. He is the managing director and the client account lead. This should be an amazing conversation because once again, we have one of the founders of the great organization, BIIC. Thank you so much for joining with us today, Tony.
Good to be with you, Amy. How are you?
So can you please tell us about yourself and your role at Accenture?
Okay. All right. So a little bit about myself. I guess I probably would explain or describe myself as spending probably half of my career in industry and half of my career delivering services into industry. So either consulting, outsourcing, managed services, right? So I've actually, done the reverse. Most consultants actually come into consulting as a wee pup and grow up and then burn out and go into industry. I'm a little bit backwards. I was actually in industry first and grew up in industry, multiple industries, insurance first. And then I went into outsourcing and then consulting. So that's kind of my the Cliff Notes version of my professional background. The most important part of me is I'm a father of a 25-year-old girl. And we have a dog, and I'm a very good husband to my wife.
Very good. That's always good to hear. So what made Accenture decide to become a founding sponsor of BIIC?
Yeah. So, it goes back mostly to Accenture's commitment, not only to diversity, equity, and inclusion, but more specifically, Accenture's commitment to industry expertise. We have a pretty strong industry consulting background. And when I say a strong industry consulting background, what I mean is there's some consulting organizations that really focus on what I would call functional expertise or competencies across multiple markets or multiple industries. So things that they can apply to any industry. And more about the relationship they have and the expertise that they're bringing, such that, let's say they're M&A consultants or they're SG&A optimization consultants, strategy consultants, right? Which is all important. But at Accenture, we really think that the handshake or the intersection between consulting or expertise in consulting and industry expertise is really the value that we bring to our clients. So given that Accenture is really dedicated to the insurance industry and also very, very dedicated to diversity, equity, and inclusion, once I brought the idea of being all in on BIIC, it was really not a long conversation at all. It was a very short conversation, and the leaders within the firm pretty much said, "Where do we sign?"
Well, that's good to hear. So with Accenture being one of the founding sponsors, Accenture will have been members for a year in March. What kind of conversations is this driving in your organization?
Yeah, I would say it's a continuation of conversations that we have already been having, right?
Okay.
So, as I said, Accenture has a pretty long lineage of being focused on diversity, equity, and inclusion. We have, I guess I would say, using some of the consultant speak, we have an operating model of diversity, equity, and inclusion. And it's more about how people feel, how leaders show up, the results they have, and ability to bring your whole self to work, as opposed to what programs we have in place. Okay. That's not to say we don't have programs in place, and we don't have, let's say, the ERGs, and we don't have apprenticeship programs and everything that you would look at an organization from the outside to see if they're doing the right things. But I would say Accenture has the results, right?
Okay.
So, one of the things that was really important to me when I came to Accenture was that I felt comfortable, right? You may look at me and say, hey, Tony's a pretty young man
Yes.
early in his career, but I'm not.
Yep.
Pretty long in the tooth, and I've done a couple things throughout my career. And to be honest with you, Amy, I have the choice of an organization that I would affiliate myself with. And there are a lot of things that are important to me, but really two main things that were important to me when I came to Accenture. One is, did Accenture actually do the things that they're supposed
Mm-hmm.
to do in the communities, in the industries, and with the employees from a diversity, equity, and inclusion perspective? And would I really feel that I could bring my whole self to work? Would I really feel that I could show up as Tony Stedman and not show up as corporate Black professional Tony Stedman? I could show up as Tony Stedman, of which corporate Black man Tony Stedman is a part, but it is not all of who I am. So I did my due diligence. Luckily I had some folks that I knew that worked within the organization, and I also had some folks that I knew that had left the organization, and it was very consistent, the things that they said that aligned with those things that I just said were important to me. So, long-winded answer to your question, the conversations that BIIC has caused us to have within the organization is really a continuation or a double click into that industry lens that we need to have in order to make sure that we're doing the things that we should do to make sure that our industry, the insurance industry, shows up as well as some of the other industries that we participate in show up.
That's really good. That's really good. So, with what you said and, the conversations held around, what's going on with Accenture, how do you see the mission and the work of BIIC influencing the industry?
Yeah, it probably doesn't sound like a loaded question, but the answer is going to be very loaded.
Okay.
So, I'm gonna I grew up in the Bible Belt, Amy. So everything I say probably sounds like a parable. So excuse me for telling stories anytime you ask me a question. But so way back when Susan Johnson and Ivy Kasinga approached me about the idea they had about BIIC, they issued a problem statement. And that problem statement was, listen, there are some issues within the insurance industry as it relates to how Black executives are welcomed, the to success that Black executives have, and also the culture of the insurance industry, right?
Right.
And quite frankly, there were examples of Black executives who had succeeded, but there was no playbook, there was no consistency, there was no ecosystem by which we could carbon copy the success that certain Black executives had within the insurance industry. And quite frankly, by and large, there are way too many instances of mid-level Black executives who had hit a ceiling or who had had enough and just left the industry. Also, as far as early career talent was concerned, if you think about it, not just Black talent, but it's hard to get talent into the insurance industry because, quite frankly, it's just not seen as sexy, right? Now, when you also add the fact that, listen, if I'm talented and I'm going to go into an industry, I need to see examples of people succeeding in that industry that look like me.
Correct.
Add that to the part that it's not that sexy, then it is a self-fulfilling prophecy that you won't get a lot of Black talent into the industry. So you have compression at the top, you have issues with people coming in, and it's a self-fulfilling prophecy that you won't have a lot of Black talent in the industry, and then you won't have a feeder group of talented executives to come up. And then, of course, then you have the cultural issues that need to be solved for. A lot of things to solve for.
Right.
So, quite frankly, we said, do we solve for the industry, or do we, as the flight attendants would say, put your mask on before you can help someone else? And we decided to be unapologetic about focusing on ourselves and making sure that wherever the Black executives are, whatever company they are involved in, that they would have the tools to succeed. And they may be able to change their organizations, but we did not feel that at this point in time, we wanted to bite off trying to change the industry.
Right.
We said, listen, if we're successful at providing a playbook and providing skills and resiliency for Black executives across the industry, they will succeed. They will change the industry. They will change their companies. They will change the cultures. So that was really the goal. So again, a story to answer your question, it really wasn't about changing the industry directly. It was about making sure that Black executives within the industry were resilient. They had the tools to succeed, and then they could go back and change their organizations.
That's really good, because looking at, of course, historically, the industry has really not been diverse as it should be. There have been tiny strides, but of course we all know there could be more. So in your opinion, how does the insurance industry's dynamics and history drive to a place of inequality in the first place?
Another parable for you.
Okay.
So young Tony Stedman, before he went back to graduate school, came out of undergraduate school at the University of South Carolina. So I was born in Washington, D.C., but, as we would say, I was raised in South Carolina, right?
Okay.
Raised in a little town where the term, the other side of the tracks actually, was true to form, right?
Mm-hmm.
In a town that the railroad track separated the town. White people lived on one side of the town. Black people lived on the other side of the town, right? So that was my life, right? Did not see any other ethnic group other than white people and Black people growing up, unless I watched something on television, and that was my only exposure until I went to college, right? So so that's kind of my childhood. One of my first jobs out of college was to work for I'll name the company because the experience was pretty good. It was Blue Cross Blue Shield of South Carolina. I worked in the group benefits business. I was a supervisor in training for membership and agency services, right?
Mm-hmm.
I had a lot of interaction with brokers and agents in the state of South Carolina. And I was pretty successful in that role. So successful that one of the largest brokerages in the state actually offered me a job sight unseen. They had only known me through the service and the interactions that we had on the telephone, and offered me a job and said, hey, why don't you come in, meet the people in the office, and we'll talk about, where we go from there. Luckily, I didn't quit my job at Blue Cross Blue Shield before I did that, but I did take them up on their offer, went out to meet them in person, and take a tour of the office and meet the people in the office. When I showed up to, to have that quote unquote meeting in the office, met the partner in charge of the brokerage. It was a family-owned brokerage, by the way, which
Okay.
most of them are,
Right.
at that point in time, or most of them were. When I, met the individual, which I won't say his name, I got that look that we often get when people realize that the person that they were talking to on the other end of the phone was Black. I knew right then that it was not going to go in the right direction.
Mm-hmm.
They were very polite, very cordial, had good conversations during the day. Lo and behold, the opportunity no longer materialized, and it was not available. It was something that was not to happen. So continued to work at Blue Cross Blue Shield, but I had the bug, right? So,
Mm-hmm.
I understood that this is something that I could do, whether I was going to work for that brokerage or not. This is something that I could do. So to answer, just to put a point on it, one of the issues in the industry is that it is, at least at that point in time, to be a producer, you had to work for a brokerage. Most of the brokerages were family owned. Most of the families were white. Most of the families, again, hired friends and family.
Right.
And it looked like them. And then, yes, there was some overt racism. Okay. Now, fast forward, I got my agent's license, my series license, and then I went to work for another agency in the state of North Carolina, and I was selling group insurance to small businesses throughout the state of South Carolina. Then comes the next interaction. And I'll tell you about one in particular that was not necessarily anything new or anything different, but this one stood out. And quite frankly, anytime I think about it, I just chuckle. Most times when I tell people about this, they sit in amazement, but sometimes you just have to laugh about these things to keep from crying. But so again, had a phone interaction with a business owner. I think he owned a dairy in one of the small towns in South Carolina, a pretty big dairy. And I had made an appointment to go out and speak to him about group insurance for the employees in his dairy, and had probably 3 phone conversations with him and the administrator in the office. They're very excited about the group insurance, needed to come out and have a meeting to discuss it a little more, and quite frankly, to sign all the paperwork.
Right.
Almost the same situation. Showed up to the office, got the look. Oh, okay. Listened to my spiel, had pretty good interactions. And then instead of, signing and going on, he kind of, looked at me and shook his head, as as though he was very pleased with everything I was saying. And he said what he thought was a compliment, which was, just because you got a Black face, you don't have to act the fool. Okay. Thank you.
Wow.
So, need I say more about the issues that are in the insurance industry? Yes, there's racism. Yes, it is a good old boys club, and it continues to be a good old boys club. It has made progress, but quite frankly, not enough.
Right.
BIIC exists.
Thank you for sharing both of those stories, because it really leads to the concept of psychological safety. So, the first job that, they called you, they loved you, and you went out there, maybe some other person would have taken that job, but, had they offered. But even with like the looks and the vibe, can you kind of elaborate on psychological safety and how important that is to, Black professionals within the insurance industry?
Yeah, sure. So, and I'll break it down to, some very, very simple terms, right?
Okay.
Because, psychological safety is it's a technical term.
Mm-hmm.
It definitely has a definition. I was a human capital executive at one point in time, so I could probably give you chapter and verse about how do you measure it, right? How do you have a culture that makes sure that ensures that people feel psychologically safe? But quite frankly, I'll say two things. One, yes, psychological safety is important. And what it is when an individual feels safe enough to make a mistake and understands that when and if they make that mistake, it won't be blown out of proportion any more than anyone else in the organization making a mistake. They feel that they actually have friends at work. They have reciprocity as it relates to the things they give, the feedback they give, and the feedback that they can receive. I'm going to actually break a rule because you're not supposed to use the term in the definition, but they feel safe in the organization. It's the same feeling that you get when you come from, let's say, a narrow miss in a traffic accident out on your way home, and then you walk through your door of your home. How do you feel? That's psychological safety. Okay. Now, whatever an organization needs to do to make their employees feel that way, that's what they will need to do. I can't tell them what they need to do, but that is psychological safety. Now, I will also say that some organizations go a little bit too far.
Okay.
Psychological safety is not squelching people's voice and being what I would call politically correct about speaking up. You can have psychological safety and you can communicate directly. You have to have both, because if you don't have both, then again, that's not home. That's not the feeling of home. That's an act. That's someone who wants something for you, or they want to make you feel a specific way, and it's not genuine.
Right.
So, having said that, again, psychological safety is the feeling you have at home. And that's what organizations need to espouse to do within their cultures, right? Within the four walls of their
right. So with the four walls and feeling safe, earlier you spoke a lot about, Accenture in general, how you feel about working there. So for other Black execs who may not have this same feeling, and maybe they're considering, I don't know, leaving, to a place where that will elevate them more. Does Accenture currently have any internal initiatives that focus solely on, Black workforce executives or Black talent in general?
Yeah, yes, we do. But I would say solely, but not only.
Okay.
That's how I would say it, right? Solely, but not only. And I'm gonna, I'll talk about other organizations' definitions of diversity, and then I'll talk a little bit about Accenture's definition of diversity. Most organizations that I have been a part of, and I've worked for a few different organizations that, let's say, they were on the list of companies that, had great diversity numbers, scorecards. They're on the list, right, of top 100 or whatever you would call them. But for Black people in the organization, whether they be Black men or Black women, we all knew that diversity meant white women.
Right.
That's what it meant. Right. And if you looked at the way those organizations promoted, recruited, it was really about making sure that they would say women were in top spots, women were mentored. But what ended up happening was, again, the thing that was familiar, the thing that was easy, it ended up being white women. Was it overt? Was it on purpose? I don't really care. It was the fact. Now, Accenture actually, my experience, which is quite frankly a bit limited, right? I haven't spent my whole career at Accenture, but I've done my non-empirical research of Black executives that are here, as well as what I've experienced myself. Diversity, equity, and inclusion at Accenture includes people of color, includes Black people, not just people of color. And there are specific initiatives focused on making sure we're recruited, making sure that we are developed, and making sure that we are promoted, again, based on our merits. We feel it, right? I think the numbers kind of bear that out. Now, I'll also say, yes, I love working at Accenture. I love the culture. Is it perfect? No organization is perfect. But that's why we continue to do the things we do, continue to continuously learn, and be involved in organizations like BIIC, not only so that we can give, but we can also learn ourselves. So that's what it's all about at Accenture.
So the companies who are currently still, when they say diversity, it's mainly, white women. How can these organizations, go beyond, those statistical changes that they report and actually drive change?
The what do you have to do to solve the problem? There's their playbooks, their operating models, their methodologies. That all that stuff has been written. So to me, the answer is, well, the question is, how do we put that mirror in front of those organizations and make them realize that, yeah, I know you think you're doing the right things. I know you're thumping your chest about what your results are, but guess what? There are a bunch of people within your organization that won't speak up, that know that if they said something against what you're doing, they would be frowned upon, ostracized, right? And it would not work out for them professionally. So you have to put the mirror in front of their face. Now, does BIIC have the secret sauce to actually solve that? I'm not sure, but in our minds, one way that we're trying to solve for that, we're trying to help organizations realize that they're not doing the things that they need to do, is that we are giving those executives that come through our program the tools to go back and communicate directly exactly how those organizations are either making them feel or not supporting the larger ecosystem of Black executives, Black talent within those organizations. It's somewhat of giving them not only the words, the tools, the methodologies, but giving them some of the courage as well to go back and do the things that they need to do. Will it be successful? Well, it's yet to be seen, but that's our thought.
That's really good. That's really good, especially the tools portion, and really looking in the mirror, like you said. How do you go about it? The change, you have to really admit it and look at yourself.
Just to put another spin on that, because when I said, all of the things you need to do, those books have been written, those methodologies, because do the same things you've done for white women within the organization. Do those things and have a focus on Black people in the organization. If you do those things, you'll have the same results. We don't want anything different, right?
That's good.
That's simple. But they have to realize that they're not focusing on that population. That's why they're not getting the results. They're making excuses. No more excuses.
That's my 2023. My 2023 goal. No more excuses. So with Accenture, what other DEI related initiatives is your organization currently implementing, whether that be internally or externally?
Yeah. So there, I'm not going to say that I'm an expert on everything that we do, but I would say, do we have ERGs? Yes.
Okay.
We have programs that we, leadership development programs specifically for females, Black talent, Asian talent, every, color and creed that you can name. Yes, we have those. Do we measure the sentiment of different populations within our organization, and then have focused interventions around where, those pockets where sentiment is a little bit lower than they should be? Yes, we have all those things, and have had those things for quite a while. The one thing I would want to call out that's relatively new, not a new concept, but new within our environment, and is quite successful, is our apprenticeship program.
Okay.
It's something that I didn't design. It wasn't my idea, but to be honest with you, I'm really, really proud of it. And, and definitely, within my region, within my accounts, we support the apprenticeship program. What is it? In short order, it is taking off any educational barrier that there may be for folks to enter into technology positions or consulting positions within our organization. We've stripped it back and said, okay, do you really need a college degree to succeed in these roles? And in some situations, we've said, even if you need it, we're going to strip that away, and we're going to provide extra training, extra onboarding, extra mentoring to make sure that individuals coming out of college coming out of high school, or individuals that never had a college degree that are working in another field that want to come into Accenture, that they have a path to success. In layman's terms, that is our apprenticeship program. Now, is that a program specifically focused or targeted to Black individuals or people of color? No, it's not. But we all know that the barriers to entry are those barriers more so for people of color than for any other racial group. It's a socioeconomic issue, whether or not you're able to go to college, or whether or not college is actually a safe environment for you to learn. So some people don't take that path. Doesn't mean they won't succeed. but it means they did not take that path. So we have taken that barrier away in many of our entry points into the organization. And it has been very successful for us.
That's really good. And you mentioned tech specifically, and Black talent. So within the industry, have you seen like an emergence of support for, beyond your apprenticeship program, like Black startups, and insurtechs? Have you seen, more of the industry supporting those?
More of the industry, not so sure.
Okay.
I can definitely say that Accenture is supporting those. Not just, we're focused on insurance, you and I.
Right.
But, Accenture is actually focused on many industries because we service many industries. So I would say, yes, we're focused on Black startups, but we're in insurance. So insurtechs. And quite frankly, we've had a couple that we've spoken to. I think about a few that we had at InsurTech Connect that attended our reception specifically, and we had some focus on them. But in the larger Accenture ecosystem, we focus on Black startups across the board.
Okay.
We have an entrepreneurship program where we mentor entrepreneurs in many different industries. And we apply that model to the insurer tech space as well as insurance startups at large.
Well, thank you so much, Tony. This has been a very enlightening discussion. I felt like I was in class. So thank you so much. Thank you all for watching. Once again, this is Tony Stedman from Accenture, Managing Director and Client Account Lead, and also one of the founders of BIIC. I am Amy Cole-Smith, Director of Diversity at the Institutes, and we will see you next time for our next BIIC Sponsor Spotlight. Thank you.
Thank you, Amy.